Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to, every time I come in these days, the emotions are just really intense. So, so we've been feeling over the last, well, it's been emerging, I would say, over the last few weeks, but really these energies. Um, in regards to the union fields. Now, I have a hard time talking about these things, right? I know, especially when we go to some of these things, there's this immediate kind of um, twin flame energy that comes up. And yet, what we are truly talking about is inner union with the own self, right? Now, of course, being a human, being here means connecting with other people, right? So there is this energy of connectivity that we are wanting to cultivate. So yes, it is all of these things, but the focus, of course, starts here. Um, I know that there's a lot of desire to connect with our soul group, and there's a lot of desire to connect within community in ways that are more peaceful, sustainable, ways that feel more to be in flow with our natural way of living. And yet, if we are still coming into those relationships and those interactions, right, not understanding our own selves, it's still going to cause chaos, even if we're doing it from the perspective or with the intention, right, of having something greater than what, let's say, these matrix systems are allowing or affording us. Um, However, I do want to talk about relationships specifically. Hi, guys. Um, One of the things, I've been going through this process of looking at my own relationship and understanding why I've been having so much trouble, why I've been feeling so triggered around it. And I've kind of started dissecting, right, in this range of looking at it from this codependency, right? So where I was not feeling secure within my own self, and where I started to realize that this level of shame that I have been embodying was really controlling the way I was showing up and responding, not just in my relationship, in everything in my life, right? But it's most concentrated when we are kind of in these one-on-one situations, right? Where there is that sense of urgency or that sense of um, the greatest risk, right, of feeling rejected or abandoned. And that's why intimate partnerships, these very close relationships, not only are so vital, right, but feel so dangerous to us as well. Um, so this has been coming up a lot over the last week, and I just wanted to talk about this a little bit. That yes, there are energies, right? There are energies that are greater than just us and our human that are affecting us. There are control energies, and yes, there is more than just what is on this planetary body, right? There are things that have come here, these galactic energies, wherever they are, wherever they've come from, right? That do affect us, and that do affect relationships, and that do affect humans' attempts to evolve together, right? Especially, and it's not just unions, right? But with the soul groups as well, there are energies that are really kind of um, pushing this out from really kind of coming together and magnetizing very strongly. And this is part of the issue too, right? We have all of these kinds of fears around it, but if we look at it, it's like these fears are truly the same core fears, right? Of finally connecting, finally feeling like we have that deep connection, and then the fear or the possibility, right, of losing it, of being disconnected. It's like in some ways it feels better to avoid it altogether, right? I'd rather not even know what it is than have to experience and now have that taste of it or the experience of it, and then the feeling of losing it. Um, I know there was, I remember seeing something where someone said, well, when a relationship ends, it doesn't really take anything away from you. You are still the same person you were, right? But if a relationship shows you something greater or exposes you to something greater that you didn't have an understanding of, right? Or you didn't have an awareness or something within yourself that it kind of called up that you weren't connected to before, right? The loss of that relationship can also feel like a loss or death of those parts and pieces, right? That were exposed or even created or just brought to the surface, right? So um, I know there are all these kinds of ways of talking about relating, of talking about how we have to be secure and healthy and happy on our own, right? Before the relationship will actually work. There's a lot of truth to that. And yet it's not the only answer, right? It's not the only thing that's going on. So one of the things that I really started to understand about how I would show up in relationship, I realized, and I don't know if this is a true pattern, but I'm kind of curious because I realized that, so as a woman, right? So, and again, in relation to intimate partnerships, I'm just using these examples, but as a woman in my relationship, I realized that I showed up in my relationship, like the kind of, I want to say the negative things about me that would show up were very much the way that my mother was. But the things that triggered me in the relationships were very much about the way my father was when I was growing up. And so one of the things I have struggled with is feeling very emotionally disconnected in relationships, right? And I wouldn't even say that I knew this, but it was like I could feel something was just off. And I would say these things like, I feel disconnected. I feel misunderstood. I feel like you're not getting me. I feel like you're not listening to what I'm saying, right? Even though on some level, I knew that I was understood and I knew that I was loved and I knew there was a connection, I couldn't feel it to the point where I felt secure. And I would always feel like there was this wall or this barrier that would go up. And it took me a long time as I started looking at the shame, right? And it really brought me to my relationship with my father. And what I realized, and I had to like sit, I think I talked about this a little bit, but I really had to almost like put myself back as a child and like, okay, what is it that I was feeling? And that's where I realized what I was really feeling was shame. I was feeling discarded. I was feeling like this person was disgusted with me, right? But the way that would happen, especially through my experience in childhood, right, was someone just had to raise their voice or they moved, like I could see the disapproval, right? And I immediately would shut down. So what I started to notice was in my relationships that when I was perceiving someone was unhappy with me, or that I said something that they didn't like, or that they were showing up in a way which was like, this is how I feel and this is it, that very kind of stoic energy, it stopped me, right? It triggered me and I would shut down, which is exactly what would happen in childhood. So rather than saying, okay, I hear what you're saying, this is what's going on, trying to work through it, right? I would completely shut down. So here I was saying the other person wasn't being vulnerable, right? The other person wasn't opening up. And really what was happening was that I was really embodying this energy now, the experience of the energy that I had in childhood. So the control that I felt, right, from someone's physical presence and their behavior is something I've been carrying my entire life. And I really never realized that, except, of course, again, in intimate partnerships, right? That's where those things really rise to the surface. So once I realized this is what was happening, right, my nervous system would get triggered at the slightest sound of, okay, no, or disapproval, right? This like, I felt shut out kind of thing, but it could be so subtle. And this is what took me so long, I think, to figure it out, right? It was these really subtle things that would just hit my nervous system. And before I knew it, I was having this response that I didn't understand, right? So once I realized that kind of stoic energy or I suppose it could show up as like being confident or secure too, right? But there was always this thing too, which was more like, this is my opinion, because that's what it was like when I was growing up, right? Like you don't matter, your opinion doesn't matter. It's more about what we need to get done. And you just have to fit into this box, right? And go along with the program. So whenever I felt like I was showing up that way, or I was having hold on a second, maybe it needs to be this way feeling, like there was nothing that I felt I could do about it, right? So I really had to practice. I would sit and think about then, once I learned this, right, that this is why I was having the response I was having, which was totally shutting down. I really had to put myself in place and practice, right, receiving responses that would trigger me. Okay, so what happens if this person says no? Okay, it doesn't mean they don't love me. I know they don't love me. Why am I perceiving it, right? I would have to put myself through this exercise of really kind of stretching my human field to be able to tolerate something different, right? And to look at it. So, not being in that triggered environment, right? Not being face to face with this person or the thing that usually triggers me, giving myself space to work through it with my body, having the emotional response, but giving myself time to unravel the story that I was putting on it, which is, you don't love me, you're going to leave me, I'm wrong, I did something wrong, I disappointed you, you're going to hate me forever, this kind of thing, right? Um, and we all have these. But the thing is, like, they don't show up that way. Like, I don't have a response saying, oh my God, you don't love me, right? Like, oh my God, you're treating me just like my dad. They're hidden and they're buried, and it shows up as a nervous system response, right? It doesn't have that. It's not like a scroll that rolls out and says, okay, when so and so says this, this is how you respond, right? We have to uncover these things within ourselves. And I know there's a lot of this kind of like mindset stuff, right? Like, well, if you just continue to think positive, and even if something is showing up that you don't want in your reality, just override it, right? Or just don't focus on it, because you're really just wanting to focus on what you do want, right? But when these things are so embedded, people talk about reprogramming your subconscious, but do we even really know how our subconscious is programmed, right? Yeah. Fighting for your opinions. Yeah. Yes, because it feels like a threat to our very existence. And that's why sometimes we will have these kind of, we feel like we're dying, right? When we're not being heard. And that's not to say, like, people will say maybe, oh, you're having an overreaction. And yet it's really not when it's coming from that place. That's what the child experienced, right? So it's totally valid. But this is why we really need to look at, and looking at childhood can be helpful, but to really, really kind of start to dismantle these things and pull them apart, right? So yes, these things are patterned into our human from childhood, right? And yes, there are things that we brought here from beyond that have nothing to do even with the human experience, but they have the same template, right? There's the same familiar channel that they follow. And yes, also, do we necessarily need to look at childhood? Maybe not. We can look at our lives and say, this is what keeps happening over and over and over. I keep getting triggered by this thing, but it's really hard for the conscious mind then to know how to do anything differently, right? And it can be really exhausting, especially when we've had so much trauma, to try and keep stepping into that more positive energy, right? So what I keep getting, right, is it's about stretching our energy fields, practicing stretching, sitting in these things where we have experienced the discomfort, where we have been triggered, right? And really, the first part is noticing what is the narrative that we attach to it, right? And actually, that narrative is going to give you a really big clue to how this all started, right? A lot of times my narrative was, you don't love me, you don't want me in your life, right? Even though, like, I also knew that wasn't true. But if we look at that story and that narrative, right? Okay, actually, I'm feeling, yeah, like I am not being validated. I am not being recognized. And knowing that it's not about that person, that circumstance, that situation, it did come from childhood, right? So essentially, it is our own stuff. And I really, I've been looking at all of this relationship too, or this relationship kind of therapy, right? Where it's like, we have to know the attachment wounds, and we have to know, these bonding issues, and we have to know how to talk respectfully, so that we're not triggering these wounds. And again, this can get really super exhausting. Not to say it isn't helpful, but when we're looking at these core things, right? What we really find is that if we can root it out in ourselves, we understand why we're having the responses we've been having, right? We understand why we're feeling the way about things that come into our reality. That's also it's not a reflection, right? It's like the internal is a reflection into the external. It's what's really going on inside of us. And yes, we can have someone really awful or someone saying really awful things to us, right? But the reason that we even have a relationship with that kind of energy is because it's sourced somewhere in our past, right? So when we can truly know how we became how we are, right? None of that stuff really matters, because when we feel absolutely secure in ourselves, right? Like, okay, I know when someone starts to get a bit stern, it's going to potentially flip my nervous system a bit, right? Okay, that's not who I am, though. That is not who I am. And the more that we start to, again, it's like pulling these threads out, right? The more rooted and secure we're going to feel in our own selves. We're going to have a better feeling about who we are. This concept of who we are as a human, as a light being, right, is going to expand. It's going to start to build. We're going to start to feel better about ourselves, where we can really start to show up in that energy. And no matter what is being expressed to us, towards us, we also will start to understand that that expression is also a learned behavior, right? And that behind that expression is a truth. There is a truth of that soul that is trying to express its own internal needs, wants, desires, realities in a way that will be received. And if I can see past what is showing up and what would normally trigger us, right? This distortion, the learned coping skills. If I can see through that, and I can see through it because I've seen it and experienced in my own self, and I know what that is like, right? I know what this means. I am just trying to be heard. I'm trying to be acknowledged. I'm trying to be witnessed, right? That's all we are ever really wanting, is to be seen. And the reason we're in so much pain is because we can't really show up as who we are, right? And we can't show up because who we are, because that's what happened to us when we were younger, right? But our parents did that, our caregivers did that, because they couldn't show up as who they were either, right? And so it's like, this is the lifetime where all of this actually ends, right? And this is part of the energy that is coming in, and why things can feel so, again, there's like this pressure, right, of things just rising to the surface, and they feel so confusing, because it's everything, really, everything that we have gone through, not just in this lifetime, but all lifetimes, right? Again, they're all patterns, so they're all similar, right? It's not like we have hundreds of patterns from this lifetime and then the next. They're all going to be related in some way, right? So there are these core ways that we can start to understand and dig these things out. But to know that at the root, what we truly desire as humans is connection. And if we can hold that as a truth within ourselves, right? Understanding that the reason we feel disconnected and the reason that there is so much discord is not because we are bad humans. Humans cannot be bad. Humans are not inherently bad. It is all the other control systems and the things that are here that cause humans to have to fight to be seen, to be acknowledged, for space to show up as who we truly are, right? So we are actually fighting the same battle. We actually want to connect. We actually want to join together and co-create. It's all this other stuff around us that is trying to keep that from happening, right? And at this point, it's like a lot of that is also removed, right? But it's still embedded in our bodies. It's embedded in our biology. And this is why I want to say that even if there are other energies, like these overarching things that are causing these things, we still have to, because it's this, well, it's this electromagnetic pattern now within us, right? In our biology, that we have to understand in order to reroute that, in order to not feel like that is something that is actually trying to kill us, right? We want to connect at the core. Okay. As I was saying that too, I was feeling this it's like really in this energetic womb space, in the sacral here. And this is something we're really starting to feel, is this, I'm calling it this sacral fire, right? Because that's what it looks like. It looks like like the burner on a stove, right? Wanting to heat up this pot of water. And yet there's like this buffer, this barrier in between, this almost like an insulation, right? An insulator here, which is keeping this connection at bay. Okay, so this is even yes, it has to do with connecting with others, right? But first and foremost, in our own fields here. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little bit of work around this. So we clear through the sacral and we're clearing through the brainstem. And this feeling right here, right? This heart connection, this dropping into our own fields. This is something we really haven't been able to experience and come into communion with. So coming in right here, it's like it feels so good. And yet in the past, there would be triggers, right? Almost fears. This feels uncomfortable. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be here. But actually what I'm getting, see, and then this is the theme that's been coming up, is our initial arrival here, right? When our energy field first came in contact with this earth realm, we're wanting to come back to this place. So just see the correlation with that too, right? If we could imagine, let's say, growing up without all of those kinds of things, right? That shame, wounding that was placed on us. And if our perception of the world was free and clear of that experience, it's like a refresh back to origin, this first encounter with the earth's field. Now, since then, of course, right, the earth has been kind of infiltrated with all these control energies. So we've had lots of experiences of coming back in a body and feeling that control, feeling the awfulness of what was here, right? But we're not talking about those experiences anymore. And yeah, see, this is where the energy just starts to light up in the body. It's like we really don't have to root out and relive the trauma anymore. It feels like we do, because as far as we've been able to survive this long, right? That's kind of how we had to work through it in our psyche, in therapy, in all these kinds of modalities, right? Trying to just feel okay and secure. But that really doesn't have to be that way anymore. And what it requires, though, is dropping back into the energy field and finding this place of communion and really cultivating that feeling in the body, right? So if we think about the nervous system, right, when we learn these patterns, and they say, right, the body stores the history of that in the emotions, right, in the nervous system patterns. If that's what our imprint has been, right, what we're really wanting to do is find a different sense of peace in the body. So the more that we can come into that original source connection, we can do this, right? It's really a matter of just thinking about that and feeling ourselves feeling present in the body. And it is really that simple. The problem is we don't believe that we're feeling it, or we think, is this really it? Or am I just making something up, right? Like our intuition, we don't want to trust our inner knowing. But the more that we can, again, stretch our energy field, we are training our body to actually be able to tolerate the goodness. It's kind of scary when I started to realize just how much shame I was carrying, right? How much negativity I was really carrying, even though I felt like I was functioning very well. The awareness that I started to have around like the heaviness of this load was quite appalling, actually. So training, and this is, not even meditation, because I feel like meditation, a lot of times it can be more of a mental thing, right? Or we're trying to find a place of stillness, but we're not actually recognizing and not acknowledging that this is my source connection. I am right here connected to source. So we're in training and infusing that into the body. And if the longer we can cause ourselves to sit here, right, we build up this tolerance for peace. We build up this tolerance for joy and stillness. And it's crazy to think that this is part of the issue, right? We don't have a tolerance for the goodness. and all the fears and all the what ifs, but wait a second, I've lived my life this whole way. Start to rise up through the heart space. And it's part of what I struggled with too, right? It's like even my work, it's all been based on this idea of trauma, right? We've got to root out the trauma. We've got to figure this out. We've got to look at this. We've got to turn it upside down, right? Like problems, problems, problems. There's a time and a place for that. And we all have to go through some of that, right? But now the energy that is available is more about trusting what we are truly feeling than it is about solving some kind of puzzle. And the human isn't really okay with this yet, let's say. It's learned how to operate in this world for a very long portion of its life, right? According to this system, this way of navigating this world. I'm hearing, repairing DNA. So, okay, if I could be so bold as to say this, what it really feels like, I don't like this word, right? But people talk about psychic surgery, but really the energy field, how do I say this? Yes, we have a greater energy field, right? It interfaces with our human body through the glandular system, right? Through these energetic points. That is what is needing repair, but also our energy field has been damaged by, just like the human, right, has to relearn these things through the nervous system. The energy field to some degree has been damaged by being in contact with these control energies. But what I just got was, if we can really sit with this source light, right, your own, I almost want to say like your super consciousness, the longer you can sit, the more repair starts to actually occur in your energy field, and therefore then also in through your human. And I would say that rather than thinking about it in terms of manifestation, right? Like I need to stay positive and I need to ignore the reality because what I really want is something to, right? And trying to, that feels exhausting, right? This would be the same equivalent of that. To sit here, I can feel the heart almost setting into this, right? Almost like this pedestal, like plugging in here. And just feeling the rest of the energy centers drop and feel safe here. This is really almost what I feel like when Dr. Joe Dispenza would talk, right, about the quantum fields, like here we are, right? We are in the energy field itself, not identifying with any particular thing, just being here. There's a massive amount of, so I'm feeling this in the mind. And I know I've been feeling this brainstem really getting a workover lately. Yeah. And so what seems to be happening as we sit here and allow ourselves to build this tolerance, there are waves that come through, right? There are wave patterns. I have no idea what I'm talking about here. I'm just trying to describe this the best I can. Okay, there are energy waves that will come through the body. They will hit into density or negativity, or the way it felt to me, right, was like there was a fear that came up, I don't really even know what this fear was around. There was just a sense of like, I need to get up, I need to go do something, I shouldn't be here, I'm wasting time, right? As these energy waves hit into these densified, they're like densified energies, right? So where it has slowed down, where it has become more stagnant in the field, the longer we can sit here, the more of that will continue to get cleared out. And I'm just thinking now how people talk about how you have to train yourself, like to meditate, you start with just like a minute, right? Nobody can sit there for like a half an hour straight after that. It's the same thing that's happening here in the sense of clearing out. Okay. Yeah. I keep hearing this, recoding the DNA out of the trauma fields. Oh, and from the there, I don't know how to describe this. There's almost an anger that comes up from the human body that is really, I don't want to say it's in resistance, right? But I can feel that. How do I describe this? It's like, yes, it's in relation to the personality and the ego, right? But it's more like, this is how I have learned to be in the world, and it's gotten me what I've needed, right? It may not have been the best, but it's what I am used to. And therefore I'm in this comfort zone, right? Where at least it's predictable and I know it will work. What's being asked of me now is to move into something that is unpredictable. Therefore I don't have enough data to feel secure in it, right? It's almost like when someone asks you to switch, like if you've ever had to switch from a Windows operating system to like a Mac, right? And it's like, the annoyance of like, it's just easier because it's what I know. I know it's over here. I know I click here, I do this, right? Those patterns, those movements are just, it's not natural, right? But they are conditioned, so it feels comfortable. And this is what's really happening here. The body is like having this, I just felt it through the front of the mind. It was almost like this seething, like undertone of upset and rage. Like, and it comes through almost as like, I don't want to be told my trauma is invalid, right? And I know this is a big issue because here's what's happening, right? Your energy field is evolving and it is emerging and it is moving beyond ahead. You're already ahead of where the physicality is, right? And there is this thing that if we look in the world, right, a lot of so this world has set up in these control systems where it actually doesn't validate the trauma that is going on right now, right? I mean, it's something new that's finally coming to the surface where people are saying like, we need to be trauma informed and we need to hear, people who have been traumatized, we need to hear their stories and we need to understand what's going on in the world. And that is absolutely true and valid. And our energy fields have already been there. We are evolving beyond this, right? And so there can be a part of the human that's still in like, but I was never validated for everything that I suffered through. This came through in a group a couple of weeks ago where it was like, okay, the energy field wants to be recognized for what it has done, what it has gone through, right? The problem is that actually doesn't happen until we move to the other side of this, right? So there's a lot of stuff that we're having to unravel and kind of we're caught in these weird places, right? Where, okay, we've been through so much, we have suffered. It doesn't mean it's not valid. Doesn't mean it should have happened. Doesn't mean we're not recognizing that. But the old way, and let's say, even in our trauma, right, it's not like it was ever actually healed or resolved, right? We were still living with remnants of it. So it's not that we ever healed it before anyway. And now it's like we're going to not have to have, right? This is what the energy field, what the human is going to start to experience. It is almost like amnesia, as if we didn't go through that. That's how much our energy is evolving and changing. and how our DNA is recoding. And yet there is a part of the human that only feels it's human because of the level of suffering. And I don't even mean like in terms of trauma, right? But in terms of just like being in this system where it's like you have to produce and earn money and like always keep going. Otherwise, you're not going to have the resources to live here, right? So it's a very valid part of the human that is struggling with this right now. And we can also feel that peace, right? That is coming from that external kind of system that says it has to be this way because this is what keeps this cog running, right? So it's several things. Absolutely, we are being pushed right into our own, how's this coming through? Our own dynamic source creator field. Also, we're still trying to release all of this stuff and the suffering that we've been through, right? Trying to come to terms with it, trying to understand it. We're not really quite sure. And now we're already having to move past it and forward beyond it, right? So there's a sense of things being maybe unresolved. And then we have this other energy, which is saying like, stay where you are. Who do you think you are? You're not going anywhere. It has to be this way. Yeah, social anxiety. Okay, I'll get to that in a moment. So we have many springs, right? In this sprocket, whatever it is. You know, when you, I don't know if you've ever taken anything apart and you realize there's way more parts inside of there than you thought at first, and things just kind of and bounce off the walls, and then you have to go searching for those pieces. This is a bit what this is feeling like right here. So let's bring, yeah, good. Here this is in the feminine range. Source light into the left side of the neck here and into the, feels like it's the solar plexus. Yeah, it's the solar plexus. It's a bit embedded. Good. Good. So every time these things come up, we just keep acknowledging and clearing, and we can sink a little bit deeper. Oh, thank you guys. Yeah, so the social anxiety, you know, I'm not an expert on anxiety. All I can say is what my own experience is, and what I see from the experts, right? What I see being told to us, and how that shit never works for me. What I found for myself, and I wouldn't say I have extreme social anxiety, but it's actually gotten worse over the years. I think the more that I isolated and pulled back, what I realized, and see if this fits for you, it may or may not be true, but I'll retell this story just in case. I feel like I've told it so many times, but I realized that it actually was not. So anxiety to me is a response to something else that's going on inside of us, right? Our body is feeling that reaction, and it's either some kind of, what causes the anxiety is some kind of either thought around what our body is experiencing, right? Again, it's like that nervous system trigger, which could be very valid, right? There may be some suppressed emotions or things that are going on from trauma that need to be looked at. But what I found was, so I told the story where my check engine light had gone on, and it didn't really bother me at first because it happened before. But the longer I was driving, I kept thinking like, shit, what if I'm really going to do damage, right? And so, well, this my anxiety in general, right? Where I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to go into this place and like explain, but like, you know, just the feeling of overwhelm that I started to experience from it. So, and I already had an appointment to take my car in, but I I was like, oh yeah, I can take it to a car shop, right? And I can have them scan the code. As I was looking at their website, and it says like, is your check engine right? And I was like, it hit me that I was like, holy fuck, I am not the only person that has a check engine light go on. Like, this is a normal, regular occurrence, right? And there's a reason that they offer this free service, because this happens to people. But I was internalizing it like this said something bad about me. And when I started to think about it, so essentially what that is, right? That is shame, first of all. But then I started to think about the way that I would approach my life, right? So if I had to go into the service shop, right? I started to see myself, like I would walk through there in not a good place, right? I was upset, but I would almost come through with this, like, probably anger. Like they probably thought I was a bit bitchy, right? When what I realized I was doing was that I was feeling vulnerable. And this was my way of protecting myself, was to, it's not really my fault, but I felt like it was my fault. Like it's all my fault. Maybe they're going to think something about me, or they're going to think, oh, it's a woman who doesn't know anything about her car, right? Who knows what? But my point is that I thought it was anxiety, but I realized it was really driven by shame. And shame is really tricky because shame is not an emotion. Shame is not something we feel. We can feel ashamed, but that's more of like an embarrassment coupled with shame, right? So the shame is something that is projected onto us. And again, it's going to start in childhood, right? And it is where we are showing up and someone is saying no. Someone is not approving of that. Someone gives us a different message to what we are feeling. So it creates this difference, right, between who we are and what's being told to us. And that, like, shame barrier, I think is so, I think it's a huge piece that's really missing in some of this. So social anxiety, I know, and again, I don't suffer the worst from it, so I can't speak to it directly. I could be totally off. But my daughter does, and I think that when I look at her and when I look at my own self, it really does stem from a place of, I don't feel totally confident about myself, even though, like, I do feel confident. Like, I have a lot of skills. There's a lot of, like, worth that I know that I have, right? I bring a lot of value. And yet there's a part of me that doesn't feel that. But the part of me that doesn't feel that is the part of me that was told that I was wrong. You know what I mean? So it can get really confusing, because on the one hand, it's like, I have this anxiety and I feel uncertain and I feel uncomfortable when I have to show up in relation to other things. And yet that's not who I am, right? There's like this crying out from inside of us. These things don't match up. And then we can feel so crippled by it because it feels like something that we can't control. Yeah. I did a thing this past weekend on shame. It's really tricky. And I do not believe it's given the kind of attention that it needs to be given. It's a huge piece. And I do feel it is really underlying so many things that we struggle with. I know on my last thing, I said something which I think probably triggered some people, but I had this realization of like, wait, I can be depressed and not feel bad about it. But my feeling about what depression was mostly about feeling bad about myself, which is mostly the shame, right? Like, there are biological reasons that we feel like our system is depressed, right? Or it can be depressed. And yet the bigger part of depression is not the depression itself. It is the shame that gets put around it, right? And maybe probably any mental health issue that we talk about, right? But it's like, it's not really mental health. It's like, it's the control, right? Where we are told we can't show up how we're showing up, where we are told something is wrong with us. And it always comes. Always. And this is what I said. This is the intelligence of shame. This is how we can use shame to our benefit, right? it is always going to hit into a place where you are showing up in your highest expression, where your truest potential resides, right? Your capacity for joy and exuberance is your gift to the world. And when you show up in those ways and someone tells you it's wrong and shames you, right, now you have this relationship around that. But that's where we can use the shame, right? It's like, why, what am I feeling here? What's really going on? And when we start to identify the way shame has shaped our personality, has shaped the way that we respond to the world, therefore has shaped our experience of the world, it really starts to unlock a lot of stuff. Because this is the thing, right? We are here to show up in our fullest expressions. The world needs us as our creator being, as our creator selves, right? Our creator being, our creator expression. Yeah. Yeah. The shame it's, I just can't believe like nobody really talks about it in this way. It's a huge key, I think. But this is why I think it's coming up now too. Like this is the thing, right? We can't discredit or discount the fact that it's coming up so strongly right now because this is how we control people, right? We see this over and over. In fact, well, I was going to bring up the story. I still haven't looked this up to see if it's true, right? But my daughter always told me how, and again, I don't know if this is true, but like in the concentration camps, like originally pink was a male color, a masculine color, and blue was a feminine color. But in the concentration camps, again, I don't even know if this is true because I don't remember seeing this at all. But they made them wear the opposite colors, right, as a way to create this sense of shame. Wow, it's such a control energy. So what I have been seeing, when our energies first came to the earth, there's always this feeling of like having to go through a checkpoint, right? We had to hand over a passport. We handed over control of our energy field. We were told, so get this, right? This is how it feels to me. This is how it comes through. We were told that our energy was going to destroy something, that we were too powerful. What better way to make you feel bad about yourself than to tell you that the very thing that is so special about you is going to kill something, is going to destroy something. Who you are is dangerous. Who you are is bad. Not only are you bad, you could cause such an immense amount of destruction. But that's what we're carrying inside. And it's not just from this human experience, it comes from beyond too. And this is what's really coming to the surface right now. And all human beings are wanting to do is to connect and co-create and evolve and expand. And we're struggling to do that because of these energies. So, yeah. I mean, I always think what I'm going through is so personal, and I have a hard time that's just the way I not that I'm teaching, right? But that's what I default to, is like, this is what I experience. But I do know like everything I go through is because it's what's coming up in the energy field. So Operation Delirium. I've not heard of that one. I'm going to have to check that out. Thank you for that. So let me tell you my story then, because I really haven't been, I'm going to cry. I really haven't been I've been vocal about it, but I don't think I've really laid it out. So here's what happened to me. So in my relationship, as I was talking about, right, like I was getting triggered. And I studied myself, right? Like, let me learn about the nervous system. I went through this whole course, like, how do you help support the nervous system? How do you calm it down? Here's all these exercises to do, right? Still wasn't working. I'm like, is this related to the moon cycles? What the heck is going on? Am I just insane? Should I just not be in relationships because I'm so broken and so traumatized that I cannot stop myself from having these emotional reactions, right? And causing issues in my relationship. And even though I would say, okay, I need space, I need to like figure this out, like I still could not do it. But there came a point where everything just kind of came to a head and it was like, all right, we need this space. Within 2 days of that, so within 2 days of that happening, I thought I was gonna start to like go back and think about the history of my relationship, right? Like, okay, what happened? What are our issues? Like, what are we going to need to work on in therapy? Like, what is my attachment style? How is that interacting with his? But what started to happen was I actually had a lot of my dad's energy coming up, right? I had a lot of childhood stuff that was suddenly surfacing. And I was blown away because I was like, it's not like I haven't studied this. It's not like I don't talk about this shit every day, right? But I somehow went into the depths of this. And then I started to realize, okay, what's going on is this codependent behavior. Okay, all right, but what is that, right? Because again, these are just labels for patterns of behavior that we exhibit, and it's an easy way to like try to contain it and understand it, but it's never really the core of what's going on. But that's when I really started to sit, okay, what was I feeling? And that's when I discovered in my dad, in relation to my dad, right? It was that shame energy. And as I started to work through all of this inside of myself, and again, like I've been in therapy, I've been in recovery groups, right? I know all about codependency. I studied all this stuff. For some reason, it was not hitting into me though. This time, the light bulbs are going off like crazy, right? This time, when I go in my body and I ask, like the wisdom, this is what's happening, right? The wisdom within us, we are finally able to access. And this isn't like, I don't think it's that I like the light bulb just went off and I suddenly got it. I really do think it's in the energy fields, right? These things that were keeping us from being unable to really work this out in our human bodies, right? So there is definitely something that's happening here, why this is coming up so strongly. Yes. And at the same time, right, all these things that I'm talking about, I was able to take back to the relationship and really see, as I said, like how I was responding. But, and things will come through in the group sessions and in the energy sessions, and I say things, and to me, it feels like I'm just speaking from my human, right? But I'll think back sometimes, I'm like, oh my God, I said that. And it's not that I'm just saying it. It's like, this is stuff that is channeling through me, right? Like sometimes I have to go back and I have to listen to my own stuff because I hear it so differently when I'm listening back to it. But, and I forgot the point I was going to make with that, because there was something that I said in terms of the energies that are happening right now. Okay. Anyway, to me, it felt like I was going into what people might call a dark night of the soul, right? But what really feels to be happening to me is that these things are finally actually getting released out of my body, out of my cells. Now, it's not just that the energy blows through and I feel fine, right? As you can see, I'm having to work through it in a mental way too. I'm having to understand the pattern. I'm having to, again, stretch myself to be able to tolerate what I perceive as being a negative trigger, right? To give myself space to allow myself to unravel the story that's been wrapped around it in my human, right? That work is still important, I feel, right now. We're having to unravel it in our own selves. But the energy that's here, it's like every day there's massive realizations, right? The pace at which it is happening is unprecedented. And so this is where I'm saying, like, we should really be taking advantage of this, right? One of the things that I have like I feel a lot more stress though too. Like this is the strange thing, right? It's not strange, so we'll get to the bottom of this, but I feel a lot more stress in my body, like, and in like my mental, I feel like I'm being like, I have to be very careful, right? I find myself getting really caught up and feeling spun out, where I'm really having to force myself to just sit, and either it's, journaling or reading something, to get myself out of this like spinning energy that feels to be going on right now. And I really do think that is, again, related to the control system. I hesitate to say patriarchal, right? Because to me, patriarchal is not even what it really sounds like we talk about, but that control energy that wants to keep us in line. And yet that being engaged with it and being stuck with it is way more painful now than it is to be in our own energy fields, right? Whereas before it was like almost too painful to come into our energy field because it felt like we were just imagining and dreaming and wasting life, right? It's like we have to like take care of life and make sure we're whatever. It seems to have flipped, at least from what I'm experiencing, where I'm having a really hard time almost prioritizing being in my energy because of this sense of urgency that will come up. But yet it's way more painful to not be connected into my energy field. So I do want to mention too, so I call it a father wound. I know for me, I'm really looking at my relationship with my actual father. But when I titled one of the videos, I think I called it the father of all wounds, right? The shame. To me, again, the shame, very, very specific kind of control. Because what it really does, it has this feeling of breaking the soul, right? So devastating. And that, right, that is really our deepest vulnerability, who we are. Sorry, I'm just thinking back, like almost rewinding my words here. Who we are as a soul, why we came here, our purpose for coming here was to be this expression of love and vulnerability, right? So that most potent part of ourself is really being, it's not that it's being targeted. It feels like it's being targeted right now, but it's because it's coming to the surface to be released. Yeah. And as I'm saying it again, I'm getting the same spot. We've been seeing this for weeks now here on the masculine, in the masculine ranges too. So yeah. And it keeps coming back to this sense of security, the sense of security that we have from our established patterns. Yeah. And it's like this, I can feel it, like it wants to come out, and this feeling too of us wanting to be our full expression, right? We are just dying to be here fully as we truly are, for the purpose we truly came here to be and to serve and to share. And yet, so there's like this kind of fighting thing going on here, but that's what this energy feels like. And I'll just call it like this patriarchal domination, right? Because it is this, again, it's not even so much the fear anymore, but it's almost like I can feel it in my cells, right? There's like this, I want to let go, but I don't know how to let go kind of feeling. Okay. So I'll just do one more thing. What time is it here? Okay, I got time. I want to come into the sacral because now that this is coming up so clearly here, so thank you for the conversation. I mean, I love all the comments, all of the things that you guys bring up. And having that here really kind of helps to clarify. Because as I started to come back into the sacral and I had that awareness of this, again, it's coming up like insulation, right? So a break in connectivity. I felt it through the front of the mind and the base of the brain here. So let's see if I can get a better. So let's just bring your source light here. So I'm getting a couple things. Yes, it's ancient energy, but it's coming up as a very young child too. There's like a softness and a gentleness to this energy here, right? Like so pure. And the thing that I get from it, so this is interesting considering our whole conversation here. The thing I get from it is like the softness where, kind of like how I was talking about with the nervous system, right? Or this tightness, this tension, this shame, right? It creates this rigidity almost in our body. What I'm feeling with this young child, right, is like that doesn't exist. It's like you can push it and you can feel the indentation, right? There hasn't been any hardening yet. This is the piece and part of us that is wanting to, I'm almost getting like resurrect, to be able to be at the forefront, right? To be able to be, it keeps coming through as impressionable. But is that almost like a stance that we need to, not a stance, right? But a way of being that we need to relearn how to adopt. Because earlier I was talking about having this idea, like letting go of, but this is what works. This is what's always worked. And this is the only sense of security I have now in this world because, well, my vulnerability didn't bring me security. So I had to adopt this way of being, right? And this is almost what we're being asked, is to return or relearn to be impressionable. I'm actually like, there's a lot of tears here, actually, like, because I also feel like, so I've been saying this too, where it's like the human and the soul, the energy have to learn to work together, right? In relationship, in communication, in communion. And this is really the first part before we can start to expand, right? With other souls or with other connections and relationships. But what it feels like here is that we're being asked to adopt a sense of being impressionable. It's not impressionable to the external world in terms of the control in the matrix, right? This is impressionable in relation to your own source energy that is coming up within you now. So the best way I can describe it is like having a reinstallation of the child energy, right? And yes, the back of the mind, right? That the memory of what is, we have that still, but that is slowly beginning to release as we can release from this deeper sense of shame, which is very much related to these ancient galactic energies too, right? So re-adopting this sense of allowing ourselves to be impressionable. And the reason this is important is, as I said earlier, right, what we are really wanting to do is connect to the soul and the source and the truth of others. It's really hard to do when we already have these ideas, these narratives, these preconceived notions. We're having to really drop, like, I would have never even thought it was my mind that was kind of doing this when I was looking at how this person was responding to me, let's say, right? But what I did find was that I really had to drop the human part of me and listen from my soul, and listen, it, not even the heart, right? It really was listening from my soul. And it was a very different way of showing up, because the human says, this isn't safe. You need to protect yourself. You need to do something to protect yourself. Right. So this is what's going on here. We're having to drop this armor, and it's deeper than we ever thought it was, right? It's in everything that we are. The way I would even describe my personality, right? Like, that's all part of this armor. We have learned this. So you're not tiny souls. You have big missions here, right? You're setting out to do big things. And this feels really weird and awkward right now. I understand. I get it. But there is this sense of like, yeah, being like a cracking off that shell, right? Being that kind of soft-boiled egg that wants to understand others, that wants to connect at a soul level with others. And yet first, this is what we're having to do for ourselves, right? So what I have found, that the beauty of the shame, right? Well, again, how can we say that? Because like, if it was never there, we would have never had to experience it, but it is, right? So we have to deal with it. But the journey through the shame, the beauty that I am finding in it is that I love myself so much more. And it's not about cultivating a sense of self-love, right? You know how people say that, like, oh, you have to work on your self-worth, or you don't love yourself enough. And so we're like, oh, how do I love myself more? I know I love myself, but why am I not feeling with it, right? It is the shame. So this voice that I had inside that I did not even realize, that underscored everything, right? It did not allow me to feel the love for myself, because what I was really feeling, what I was really having the sensation of in my body was you're wrong. Everything I looked at in my world, unbeknownst to my conscious mind, had an undertone of wrong, 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 wrong. There's something wrong with you. And I realized like this would cause a lot of my upset. Even when I would go to look at my house, right? And it's messy and whatever. It's like, I wasn't just seeing the mess. I was seeing what that mess must mean about me, right? Which was the shame. And so when I learned to separate that from the things I was perceiving in my reality, like suddenly, oh my God, I feel like a totally different person, right? I'm able to relate to others in a totally different way. So there's a big gift when we can allow ourselves to look at the shame and see through the shame, right? The trick that lies in shame. It really is, right? It's control. So it really just is a trick, tricking us out of believing that we are valuable, that we are loved, that we are worthy, that we deserve. We don't have to put anything at the end of that word deserve, right? We deserve all of it, everything. Okay. Yeah, this feels so super activated here. This is really good. So thank you again for all of your comments and your love. So just a reminder too. So Sunday, I'm going to be doing the Emerging Healer, the Sunday Soul Group, where I'll be looking at everybody's energies individually and so as a group collective, right? Which was really, really powerful last time. It was really very different and I really loved it. So that's going to be Sunday at 2:00 if you're interested. The link should be in the description, but you can always find everything on my website as well. And then I'm actually also going to start doing, so I also I call them, what did I call them? Field journeys, right? But the quantum field journey. So it's kind of like hypnosis. But I'm actually going to do a group session. I believe it's the first weekend of March. But why I love this kind of work, it's exactly what I was talking about earlier, right? About needing to feel it and infuse it into the body to start to become comfortable and to start to build up this tolerance for it. But the reason I love those sessions, anytime I have done them, right, it's less intellectual, it's less mind-based, it's less about the knowing, and it is way more about connecting with your higher consciousness, your higher self, whatever you want to call it, right? Your creator energy, your source. You literally feel it in your body as your experience, right? So it is almost as if you're completely changing your reality for this time, right? So rather than relating to the external or the matrix or the control, you are fully immersed in your own self. It's so rare that we actually take time or feel this experience within ourselves, right? During the day, we'll have these brilliant thoughts and ideas and the wisdom flows up, right? But it's still almost like a mechanized version of it. So these sessions, and I love them because it's like I still have the memory of some of those experiences and the feeling, right? It gets it so deep into your system. And this is what we're really trying to do, which is to let go of the old nervous system patterning, right? And to bring on this new or this return to a system which isn't impressed with the control, right? And the only way that we actually cultivate that is through our own energy field, right? It's through sitting in this and allowing that and allowing ourselves to begin to trust in it, to love it, to embrace it, to know the value of it. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's really good. Yeah. Allowing yourself to get hurt. And it's so funny because it's like one of those realizations I had too. It's like, I can get hurt and I'm not going to die, right? Like, it seems so simple, but it's like, but this is what our body has been telling us this whole time, right? So we've been getting these messages. Yes, we can say control is out there, but it's really in our nervous system, right? Trying to control us too. It is controlling us. I love those things. Like when we find those little, they seem so little, but they're just game changing, right? And this is also why I love that kind of session work, which is kind of, going into the quantum field, right? But again, it's the human has such little experience with being in the energy of its own soul, its own quantum field, right? So I think it's really wonderful to take those opportunities. So I will be doing that in March. That will be really exciting if you're interested. So, all right, I'm going to leave this here. Thank you so, so much again for all of your comments, for all of your love. And for anyone who has donated, thank you so much. I really don't have a way to reach out, but you know who you are. I just appreciate all of your engagement and participation. And I know that you are some really, really amazing souls here to do some really astounding things. So much love to you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take good care.